Hey guys, it's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm going to talk about SOX over RDP. Thanks for the introduction, but I like to continue that a little bit. So, like it was said, I work for NCC Group. I joined them 3.5 years ago in 2016. I'm a managing security consultant and office research lead as well. That means that I'm helping others in the office regarding research. I try to give them ideas and help them out if they are stuck. I have more than 10 years in offensive security. I started quite early, and since then I'm part of it, I believe. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter account is XOREIP. Please follow me if you like this presentation. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. There is the link, but otherwise you just Google my name and it will pop up. I have a few strictly technical certificates. Those are listed on the slide. And I'm a frequent speaker on IT security conferences. I've been lucky to go around the world. I've been to almost all continents in the last few years and deliver different talks. But this is my first online talk in an online conference, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. So let's talk about the tool that I developed. So basically, the first thing that I did, that was the logo on the right-hand side. That's the most important thing about a project that you can create. I think it's really great, beautiful. But other than that, it's an extension. This tool is an extension for remote desktop from the remote desktop client. It creates a SOX 5 proxy when you use it. And when the SOX 5 proxy is created, then you can tunnel everything over this RDP channel, over the proxy. And this is ideal. This is really great for penetration testing and any other activities that you want to do over Jumpbox and you need to tunnel data over. Right now it supports Windows only. That means that the client, the remote desktop client, needs to be on Windows. And regarding the protocol, everything else, so Windows Server 2008 and Vista SP1 and everything above is supported. A little bit of technicalities here. So what are the thing that I'm using? What are static and dynamic virtual channels? Basically, the RDP protocol is quite complex. In the last few years, we had a few exploits as well. Some of those exploits abused the static virtual channels. The static and, well, the virtual channels in general, these are bidirectional data pipes. So you can create these pipes and you can connect to them and send and receive data. It's just like a TCP socket or something like that. This is inside of the RDP connection. You don't really see them. If you use Wireshark, you just see RDP traffic. You don't need to open any ports on the firewall if you have the RDP access already. And prior the RDP protocol 6.1, which was prior the Windows Server 2008 and Vista SP1, they only use that protocol, and the previous protocols only use static virtual channels. When we are talking about static virtual channels, you need to know about those that when you connect to an RDP server, those channels are set up. And the only way to terminate those sessions, when you disconnect, you terminate your session. Up to 31 channels could be used, and those were static channels. You couldn't change anything about them. But after the RDP 6.0 protocol, they realized that this is a good feature and it should be extended. So they introduced the dynamic virtual channels, which are a little bit different, more flexible, but it's the same thing. So basically, it's really great because you can open it anytime, and you can open and close anytime. So that's really ideal for the thing that I was doing here. So why did I come up with this? How did I come up with this? Basically, because of the nature of my work and our work at NCC Group, we need to do a lot of penetration testing. That's our job, right? partly. And in some cases, there are environments that we can only access if we go through a jump box. When it's a Unix jump box, usually there is a SSH. So we can easily use the SSH -d argument parameter and just create a SOX proxy with that. It's quite trivial and easy to do that. But the same functionality wasn't present in Windows and still not. So we had to figure out something to do tests over jump boxes, over Windows jump boxes. So previously what we did, we basically installed all the tools that we could on the jump box, but that's not really clean, that's not really nice. And sometimes the client asks for a list of tools they need to pre-install. Then we need to get the permissions to get it installed. And obviously, until we don't know what we are facing, we can't really gather a list of tools that we need to install. So sometimes we need to go in circles, get permissions, install tools, get more permissions, and install tools again. So that's not really practical. It has lots of limitations. It's not something that anybody should do on both sides. We were wasting time and money with this for both sides. So that's not ideal. But there are reasons why people do this. For example, PCI environments, those are highly segregated environments, and the only way to get into the environment is usually a Windows jump box. So you need to use RDP to access the environment inside. Sometimes when they have highly confidential data, they do the same, just like in PCI. Sometimes they just use RDP as an improper remote access, which is not the best, but this is what we need to work with. And sometimes it's just lack of understanding. That's why we need to do tests over RDP. So that's in the possibilities. I created a tool previously. It was called Universal Dynamic Virtual Channel Connector, or UDVC, and that was basically for one purpose, to connect and forward ports over RDP. It was working really great. I created it for two reasons. One of the reasons was to use Xfiltrate, which is the other tool that I created in the past 4 years. It's a tunneling framework written in Python. So with UDVC and Xfiltrate, you could do full layer 3 tunneling over RDP. But the only issue with this was, well, two issues. First of all, it's a bit complex to use. Not that complex, but it seems it's complex for most people. And you need to install, for example, Python on the Windows server, which is not not ideal, obviously. So I wanted to make something easier, and that's why I created the SOX over RDP. And I was somebody raised my attention on Twitter that there is this tool RDP to TCP, which is doing basically the same, but it requires more complexity. You need to download the source code, compile it for yourself, and then use it. And it's Unix only. But that's the biggest thing about it. It's Unix only. So if you are using a Windows box to test or to connect to the RDP server, then you can't use RDP to TCP. A little bit of history. The first dynamic virtual channel code that was released is called TS Teleport. It is for transporting files over RDP. Basically, it's the same thing as copy pasting over RDP. It's not really different. It's just a different implementation. I'm not totally sure about this, but I think it was released in 2007 by Ahmed Tolba. I couldn't find anything about the date or the name. This is my best guess based on Google. Then in 2011, Nicolas Collignon, sorry for the pronunciation, I'm not really good with French words and names, so sorry about that. So he created and released RDP to TCP, and that's basically something similar that I created. In 2015, David Spencer, also from NCC, created and released Loki, Sleipnir, and Fenrir. These are tools that you can use to copy paste files over RDP and do other stuff as well, but It's using a high-level API, RDP API. So the implementation and the limitations regarding this, and obviously the speed is really different for this case, and it doesn't do SOX proxies, but it's a really good tool. It's useful still. Then like I mentioned, in 2018 I created the Universal Dynamic Virtual Channel connector, which is a tool to do port forwarding, and you can do basically for port forwarding. I really hope that other people will pick up on this and create other tools like SOX over RDP based on the UDVC, but it didn't happen. So I had to step up, and this year I spent about, I don't know, 15-20 man days, days and holidays to create SOX over RDP, which is about this talk, right? This talk is about that. So how can you use it? There are two parts, two components. There is the DLL, which is the remote desktop plugin, remote desktop client plugin. You need to install it on your computer, you need to register it, and then it will be loaded into the msdsc.exe process, which is the remote desktop client. So every time you open a client, it will open the DLL, load it, and use its functionality. It doesn't do much if you are not using the other component, which is the exe. That's the server component that you need to copy, paste over the server, and double click it, and that's it. Basically, it's so easy to use. It can't be screwed up. So when you execute the exe component on the server, it connects back over the RDP channel, over RDP protocol to the DLL, and that's when the DLL starts to run so that's when the DLL starts to run, and it creates a SOX proxy. And this is it. Until, if you don't use if the DLL is loaded, but you don't use the exe on the server side, it doesn't do anything. So there is no security risk using the DLL by itself. So how can you install it? I'm going to show you in the demo, but it's really easy. First of all, it's optional, but I really recommend you to copy the DLL into the system32 or syswow64 directory. It just makes it easier for you. You don't need to change that file at all. To install it, you need to use the rexserve32 and specify the name of the plugin. If you want to uninstall it for some reason, you use the same command, but you use the /u parameter, and this is it. For the exe, you don't need to install anything. You just copy paste it to the server and you run it, and that's it. One thing that I need to make sure that I mentioned, that you need to choose the right architecture. So the tool is compiled for x86 and x64. So if you are using 64-bit on your client, then you need to get the 64-bit version of the DLL. And if you are using 32 bits on the server, then you need to get the exe for the 32-bit build. The configuration, that's really easy. That's for the DLL. So the DLL spawns the SOX server, and if you go to registry under that key that is listed, that is mentioned on the slide, then there are 3 different settings that you can change: enabled 1 or 0, basically to enable or disable the plugin. The IP by default is localhost. You can change it to anything, but if you change it to a different IP, other people might be able to connect to your computer and use the SOX proxy over the RDP. But only in that case if the exe is executed on the server and while you have an active RDP connection. And the last bit is the port. Basically, the default port is 1080. That's where the SOX proxy will listen on your computer. You can change it to anything else that you like. Okay, demo is following now. I really hope you can see my screen. This is my Windows box that I use for testing. So I'm going to run a PowerShell with administrator. To register the DLL, you need to get administrator rights on your computer. That's not something that is hard to get if you are a pen tester. As you can see, I have all the privileges or most of it. And I'm going to go move to the right directory. As you can see, there are two files, the DLL that I am going to register in a second, and the XC, I'm going to copy that to the server. So the next step, what you do is you register the plugin. You need to do it once on your computer. I'm sorry, I didn't show you that. So this is an alert. This is a message that it succeeded, so everything is cool. It is registered now, so that's fine. And what I want to show you is that nothing is listening on the computer. So there is no localhost, there is no 1080 port, nothing is listening right now, which is expected because we didn't do anything. So now if you run the remote desktop connection tool and you try to connect to something, there will be a window, an alert box again, which tells you that the plugin is enabled and it is going to listen on localhost 1080. If you change these settings in registry, it will tell you the different IP and port, obviously. And it is going to listen there only if the binary gets executed on the server side. So let's connect to the server. This is my Windows 2008 server. This is basically a jump box to a different network. And if I copy paste the XC to the server, it shows up here. So that is great. Still nothing is listening there. And if I open an Internet Explorer and try to get to the 10.10.10.10, which is an internal IP in a different network, I can't do that, obviously. So I'm going to run the tool. It is running here, channel opened over RDP. That's the only thing that we need to know. It's running basically in the background. And if you list the ports now, you can see there is a localhost 1080. There is a SOX proxy listening there. So what you need to do is to set the proxy, right? So you need to go here. It's a bit tricky to find. Well, actually, it's already set, but it wasn't listening, so that is great. So you need to set it here. Strange thing that I figured out, that if you try proxy here, and you try to change the proxy in the settings here, it's not going to work. It's going to work if you specify like this, but it's not that easy. If you just type the IP and port, it's not going to work. So it's better to do it from control panel, network, in the internet options, and so on. So now it's set, and if I refresh it, as you can see, instead of a connection error, it gives you a message, which is a segregated web server. This is a web server which is in a different network segment. You wouldn't be able to access it. You can only access it over the RDP. But because I set up the SOX proxy, now I can set the proxy in my client settings, and I can go over the proxy, and this is it. One more thing that I like to show you is desktop 6 over. If you use -v, that's the variables mode, and it gives you a little bit more information, like where the client tries to connect. As you can see, it's 10.10.10, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that was it. And let's go back to the presentation. Yeah, so a few example scenarios where you can use this tool. So if you need to go through a Windows jump box and you have RDP access, then you might, you can use this. But more specifically, if you need to do a web application testing over a jump box, then you can set the SOX proxy in Burp or in the browser, whatever you prefer, and you can tunnel proxy everything over the RDP. There is no firewall changes. You don't need anything. You just need to get access to the server, a username, password or whatever they use, and you need to execute the XC. That's it. If you are doing internal infrastructure tests, then you can use proxy chain, or you can use tools that supports the SOX proxies. So if you are talking about Nmap or Metasploit framework, you might need to use proxy chain, but you can use these tools from your computer. You don't need to install or copy anything to the RDP box except the exe. The tool is already published. I published it like an hour ago. You can find it on GitHub under my repositories. It sucks over RDP. It's quite easy to find. You can just Google my name and you will find the repositories that are under my account. So that's easy as well. One more thing that I need to mention is the prevention or limitation. So basically, if you are a server administrator and you don't like this tool for some reason, I don't really see any reasons why you wouldn't like to help penetration testers. But anyway, you can change the GPO and you can disallow clipboard redirection and drive redirection. So you can set these to enabled that are listed on the slide. And in that case, the tool won't be able to, won't work because the static and dynamic virtual channels will be disabled. But if you do this, the administrators and other users won't be able to copy and paste files and the content of the clipboard to the server and won't be able to attach drives either. So that's not a really good step, and probably you shouldn't do this. Otherwise, it will it will make other people's lives hard. If you're a penetration tester and you have these settings on the server side, then you can't use this tool. Unfortunately, there is no other way to do this. This is based on dynamic virtual channels, and with this GPO that disables the virtual channels in full. So thank you for your attention. It was great to be here. I guess if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer it right now, or maybe later on this